Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping tariffs, sending shockwaves through the global economy. This landmark decision not only dismantles a core pillar of the America First policy, but also redefines the limits of presidential power over international trade. To understand today's Supreme Court ruling, we need to look back at the roots of Trump's bold and controversial trade strategy, a strategy that would come to define his second term in office. When Trump returned to the White House, he wasted no time in reigniting his campaign promise to put America first on the global economic stage. Almost immediately, the administration announced sweeping tariffs, some as high as 50%, on a vast array of imported goods, from electronics and automobiles to everyday household items. Trump justified these measures by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law originally designed to address national security threats, not trade disputes. The White House declared an economic emergency, arguing that foreign competition was undermining American industries and threatening national security. But critics, including many legal scholars and lawmakers from both parties, argued that the law was never intended to be used as a tool for such sweeping trade policy. They warned that this move set a dangerous precedent, blurring the lines between executive power and congressional authority over trade. The tariffs sent shockwaves through the global economy, upending decades of bipartisan support for free trade. Long-standing alliances were tested as countries around the world scrambled to respond. Many of America's closest trading partners, from Canada and Mexico to the European Union and China, retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting American exports in a tit-for-tat escalation. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Supply chains that had taken years to build were suddenly thrown into chaos. Costs soared for American companies, especially manufacturers and retailers who relied on imported parts and materials. Many business owners, large and small, found themselves caught in the crossfire, struggling to absorb rising expenses or pass them on to consumers. While industries like steel and aluminum cheered the move, seeing a rare boost in demand and jobs, most other sectors warned of higher prices, shrinking profit margins, and a loss of competitiveness on the world stage. Small businesses in particular voiced concerns about their ability to survive in this new, uncertain environment. The nation quickly became deeply divided. Supporters hailed Trump's tariffs as a long-overdue defense of American workers, while opponents saw them as reckless and damaging. Protests erupted in cities across the country, and the debate spilled over into Congress, where lawmakers clashed over the limits of presidential power. As the trade war escalated, the economic fallout became impossible to ignore. Investment slowed, factories idled, and the stock market grew increasingly volatile. International headlines chronicled the growing uncertainty, as businesses and consumers alike braced for what might come next. The controversy over Trump's tariffs soon moved beyond economics, morphing into a constitutional showdown. Legal challenges mounted, with opponents arguing that the president had overstepped his authority and usurped powers reserved for Congress. This deep national division and the high-stakes legal battle set the stage for the Supreme Court's historic decision, a ruling that would not only determine the fate of Trump's tariffs, but also redefine the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches for years to come. The legal fight over Trump's tariffs quickly became a defining test of presidential authority in modern American history. What began as a dispute over economic policy soon evolved into a high-stakes constitutional showdown, with both sides claiming to defend the nation's core principles. The courtroom drama drew national attention as legal scholars, politicians, and the public debated the true extent of the president's power. Opponents of the tariffs argued passionately that only Congress has the constitutional authority to regulate trade with foreign nations. They warned that allowing the president to act unilaterally would undermine the careful balance of powers established by the founders. In heated debates on Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both parties voiced concerns about setting a dangerous precedent that could erode congressional oversight for generations to come. The Trump administration, however, insisted that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as EEEPA, granted the president sweeping emergency powers to protect national security. White House officials argued that in a rapidly changing world, the executive branch needed flexibility to respond to threats without waiting for congressional approval. They maintained that the president's actions were not only legal, but necessary to defend American interests. The legal battle intensified when a federal appeals court ruled against the tariffs, declaring that the president's actions amounted to an unconstitutional power grab. The court's decision sent shockwaves through Washington, raising urgent questions about the limits of executive authority and the role of the judiciary in checking presidential power. The decision set up a direct and dramatic clash with the White House, which wasted no time in filing an appeal to the Supreme Court. The administration argued that the stakes were too high to let the lower court's ruling stand, warning of dire consequences for the nation's economy and security. President Trump himself took to the airwaves and social media, warning that overturning the tariffs would destroy America. His supporters rallied behind him, framing the case as a battle for the country's future. The rhetoric on both sides grew more intense as the nation watched the escalating conflict unfold. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, recognizing its profound implications. With the fate of trillions of dollars in global trade hanging in the balance, the justices prepared to weigh arguments that would shape the boundaries of presidential power for years to come. But this legal battle was about far more than tariffs or trade policy. At its heart, it was a test of the very limits of executive power, a question that has challenged American democracy since its founding. The outcome would set a precedent for how much authority any president could wield in times of crisis. As the nation waited for the Supreme Court's decision, the stage was set for a historic verdict, one that would echo through the halls of government and the lives of every American. On October 13, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a historic verdict that sent shockwaves through the nation and the world. In a decision closely watched by legal experts, politicians, and business leaders alike, the justices ruled that Trump's sweeping tariffs were an unconstitutional overreach of presidential power. The case had drawn intense public attention, with crowds gathering outside the court and news cameras capturing every moment as the country awaited the outcome. The majority opinion, meticulously crafted and spanning over 100 pages, declared that while the president does possess certain emergency powers, the authority to impose broad, open-ended tariffs rests solely with Congress. The justices emphasized that the Constitution clearly assigns the power to regulate commerce to the legislative branch, not the executive. This ruling not only addressed the specific case at hand, but also set a precedent for how far presidential authority can extend in matters of economic policy. The decision stands as a major check on executive authority, powerfully reaffirming the separation of powers that is fundamental to American democracy. By drawing a clear line between the roles of Congress and the president, the court underscored the importance of maintaining constitutional balance, especially in times of national uncertainty. Not all justices agreed. In a strongly worded dissent, several argued that the president must have flexibility to respond swiftly to economic crises and protect national interests. They warned that limiting executive power could hinder the government's ability to act decisively in emergencies. However, the majority held firm, insisting that such powers must be exercised within constitutional limits. As a result of the ruling, the tariffs that had been imposed are now null and void, effectively resetting U.S. trade policy overnight. Customs officers across the country began removing tariff notices, and ports braced for a rapid shift in the flow of goods. The decision marked an immediate and dramatic change for businesses, importers, and exporters. The average tariff rate is expected to drop by half, with economists predicting swift and significant effects on both domestic and international markets. Stock exchanges reacted instantly, with some sectors surging and others facing uncertainty. For many American manufacturers and workers, the news brought hope for renewed competitiveness and lower costs. Legal scholars are already calling this one of the most significant separation of powers cases in decades. Law schools and universities across the country are dissecting the decision, debating its implications for future presidents and the limits of executive action. Many believe it will be studied for generations as a defining moment in constitutional law. The decision has sparked intense reactions nationwide. Free trade advocates and business groups celebrated the ruling as a victory for open markets and the rule of law. Meanwhile, Trump's supporters and some industry groups expressed outrage, arguing that the court had undermined the president's ability to defend American jobs and industries. Outside the courthouse, the mood was electric. Some cheered, others protested, and the nation remained deeply divided. The impact of the Supreme Court's decision will be felt far beyond the courtroom. Global financial centers are already adjusting to the new reality, and America's trading partners are reassessing their strategies. The ruling has introduced a new era of uncertainty and opportunity in international trade. As the dust settles, America now faces a period of profound economic and political upheaval. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are scrambling to respond, industries are recalibrating, and the public is left to grapple with the consequences of a decision that will shape the nation's future for years to come. The Supreme Court's decision has triggered a bureaucratic storm. Tens of billions in tariffs must be refunded, overwhelming customs and border protection. Processing millions of claims could take years, with businesses facing uncertainty over when they'll see their money. For consumers, lower prices may be on the horizon, but supply chains and pricing will take time to adjust. The sudden policy shift creates deflationary pressures and complicates the Federal Reserve's job. Industries like steel and aluminum, which benefited from tariffs, now face renewed global competition and possible job losses. Companies must quickly pivot strategies, and the administration faces political fallout. The ruling highlights the disruptive power of abrupt policy reversals. The economic aftershocks are just beginning. The ruling is a rare rebuke of Trump's use of executive power, reasserting Congress's role in economic policy. Democrats hail the decision as a victory for constitutional checks and balances. Trump and his allies decry it as judicial activism undermining national sovereignty. The decision deepens partisan divides and puts the Supreme Court under intense scrutiny. Legal analysts suggest the court is trying to bolster its legitimacy by checking executive power. Lawmakers may now push harder to reclaim authority over trade and economic policy. The presidency isn't stripped of power, but the guardrails are reinforced. Future leaders will face tougher scrutiny. The Supreme Court's decision has upended global trade relationships overnight. Retaliatory tariffs from the EU, Canada, and others may now be lifted, potentially ending months of trade war, but the sudden policy reversal derails ongoing trade negotiations, leaving diplomats scrambling. American brands hope to recover from boycotts and reputational damage abroad. The ruling exposes the volatility of U.S. trade policy and the risks of relying on executive agreements. International partners may now demand deals with stronger legislative backing. The world is reminded of the complexity and unpredictability of the American political system. U.S. credibility as a trading partner is under new scrutiny. The global economic order is being rapidly reshaped. Experts agree. The ruling is a win for constitutional principles but brings short-term chaos. Trade lawyers warn that tariff refunds will be slow and complicated, straining businesses. Economists predict lower prices but warn of job losses in protected industries. Retail and tech sectors welcome the change. Steel and aluminum brace for impact. Legal scholars see this as a crucial check on executive power, but doubt it will reverse the long-term trend. International officials express relief but frustration at U.S. policy instability. The American system's checks and balances are both a strength and a source of unpredictability. The world is watching how the U.S. navigates this new era. The Supreme Court's decision is a watershed moment, reshaping the U.S. and global economies. It reasserts Congress's role in trade, but opens a new era of uncertainty and adjustment. Consumers may benefit, but industries and policymakers face tough choices ahead. The ruling intensifies debates over executive power and the future of American democracy. Globally, alliances and negotiations are being redefined. The story of the Trump tariffs is a lesson in the complexities of modern governance. The next chapter of the global economy is being written now, and it affects us all.